I'm Mel Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion
My
Power
name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mel Albin, your host for tonight's episode of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. For those of you that tune in every week, you know that we bring you some of the best jazz musicians that are performing today. We also cross over into R&B and into country, into gospel, anything that connects jazz to any other genre. We're interested. So we've had many, many interesting artists on our show over the past year. We've had over 100 artists over the past several years. I want to tell you a little bit more about the station too. Each week we get 100,000 to 200,000 viewers and listeners to the Power Hour. We get 6,000 listeners per day to our jazz playlist. So we're one of the largest radio stations out there, broadcasting both terrestrial and broadcasting on the internet. We're in 145 countries. We have 16,000 associated stations that pick up our shows. Through MFM Digital Broadcasting in the UK, we have access to the BBC. So we broadcast everywhere. We have over 3 million listeners in North America every month. So, jazz is alive and well, and we're keeping it that way because it's been crowded out from a lot of urban stations, and it's kind of hard to find jazz, blues stations, even rock stations are becoming extinct. So, we are dedicated as a station to preserving jazz 24/7. Source TV radio network broadcasts streaming 4K in Dolby True HD. And we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to preserve jazz. And like, other genres, including blues and rock, being squeezed out, there are a few places for jazz artists that have an hour to be able to talk about their music and talk about the creative process. That's what this show's about. We try to take you behind the mind of the artist. Every week we receive thank yous from many of you who totally aboard with FM choices. And you're listening more and more to internet radio that is free and to Source Radio, which is always free and commercial free. We're a nonprofit. So as a nonprofit network, we depend on donations and sponsors and people like yourself, our viewers. We have 3,000 registered viewers on the station, and we'd like more of you to join. And many of you have made donations to the station, and every donation keeps the music alive and allows us to bring you artists each week. The shows that we have, the hosts pay for those shows to have airtime on Source because we broadcast to such a large network. And a lot of the artists we have on also make donations because we help keep their music alive, as well as they can help keep the station alive, so they have a platform for their music all the time. Past artists on the show have included Brian Culbertson, Tammy McCann, Eric Roberson, Mesa, Annie Lennox, Billy Ocean, Raheem DeVaughn, Curtis Harmon, Reagan Whiteside, Terry Wollman, Patrick Lamb, Blake Aaron, Eric Burden, Ashley Smith, Celine Johnson, Jay Brown, Kiko Matsui, Philip Brandon, Alex Harris. I can go on and on. We've had so many wonderful artists on this show, and we continue to bring you the best. And this week is no exception. We have another sensational artist to you that I think you're going to find the music. If you don't know the music already, and most of you probably do, you'll really, I think, fall in love with the music and also with the person. The person we're going to have on today is born into a musical family. His mom and dad were both singers and did records and film and TV for 7 decades. He started on drums from age 4, then changed to guitar at age 15, although he still made his living as a drummer. When he married at age 23, he got a job as an assistant engineer at Warner Brothers Studios and began producing and engineering bands, and eventually got a production deal with Warner's. He studied math at the University of Oregon and went to Soundmaster Recording School while still working at Warner Studios. He got to witness countless records being made by Amigo Studios, with artists such as Eddie Van Halen, Christopher Cross, Ray Cooder, James Taylor, Frank Sinatra, Ricky Lee Jones, Diana Ross, Luther Vandross, and Aretha Franklin, before evolving into a two-time Emmy-winning urban jazz producer with over 75, I don't know the exact number, he can tell you, with over 75 and maybe 77 #1 radio airplay hits. And finally, a popular guitarist, artist, and performer in his own right. He started making his own CDs at age 48, kind of mid-career for most musicians. And he just finished his 13th, I believe, LP. I'll have to check that with him too. He's touring and producing records now full-time and started a super band with Brian Bromberg and Michael Paulo called BPM, releasing a great song, East Side Party, which you'll be able to listen to tonight. So, with all that said, please welcome our special guest for tonight, Mr. Paul Braun.
Hey, everybody. Nice to see you.
It took me a while to get through your history. There's a lot there.
You mean I'm old? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not. You're accomplished, not old.
Thank you.
I'm old.
Right.
Anyway, I'd like to begin the show, Paul, by you telling all of our listeners what's going on with you in 2024. What could they look forward to? Any new other releases, recordings, concerts, tours? Why don't you just tell everybody about 2024?
Well, like you said, I started a band. I wanted to do kind of like a four-play style band. And I had been doing some shows with Brian Bromberg, and we were standing in the airport in Punta Mita, Mexico. And I said, hey, man, what do you think about doing like a band, like a four-play type band with you, me, and Michael Paulo and a couple other guys? And he's like, man, it'd be great. So a few months went by, and we started writing songs and seeing if we could come up with some interesting music, and came up with some amazing stuff, and turned out to get a record deal with Shawnee Records, and we completed the record a couple weeks ago. It's going to come out in late August. And it's called Seriously. Seriously is the name of the LP. BPM, beats per minute, but it's also Brian, Paul, Michael. So, kind of a play on that. But yeah, so that's really taken some of the focus of what I'm doing. And we've been playing gigs. We went and played the Jakarta Jazz Festival, the Java Jazz Festival in Indonesia. And so that was sort of our debut. And now we're doing our actual USA debut August 18th in Temecula at the South Coast Winery. And have a bunch of shows in California, Laguna Beach Festival, and a few others.
Wow, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, and I'm still working on my solo stuff. I finished a solo album as well. That's probably come out January or February, because I wanted to put out BPM first. But and then I also been producing my wife. She's a country singer. So her second record is all mastered and ready to go too. So that'll probably come out this year sometime.
Yeah, I told you I want to have her on the show too. I think she's really unique. I've listened to some of her music.
Yeah, so. She does a lot of stuff. She's also an author. She's written 25 books. She did stand-up comedy for a while, and now she's doing, going out and playing shows, singing country music. It's pretty fun. Wow.
Both of you must be busy constantly.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this fortuitous meeting at the airport. You kind of told everybody that you kind of laid out a band and a future. Did you have this concept before you got to the airport, or did they just put you at the airport?
No, I've been thinking about it. We were in Punta Mita. Brian was hosting this concert down there 2 years in a row down in Punta Mita, which is a really special place in Mexico. And that's actually how I met Brian. And I was one of the artists on this particular festival. And so I was listening to Brian, and I was appreciating, of course, he's a virtuoso bass player, and, soloing is just insane, but his lyrical songwriting really appealed to me as well. And he's very accomplished in the studio, and he does a lot of the same stuff I do. And so I thought about that, and Michael Paolo, he's been playing with me for years, and he also does a lot of concert promoting. So I figured we'd have a shoe in to at least do 10 shows a year just with Michael Paolo. So, and we originally had the idea about having drums and piano and all that, but as we started getting into it, we just thought it would be better to keep it 3 guys, and we can do drummer and keyboard player. We can either bring guys or, get sidemen if we're going to Europe or whatever. So far, we have Tony Moore's playing drums, and Tom Zink is playing keys, and that's all the gigs we've done so far is with that unit. But basically, the 3 guys are BPM.
The 3 amigos.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'm curious about something, and to me, it's a little unusual. You're as you were just talking about, you are a drummer, a guitarist, a songwriter, an arranger, producer, sound engineer, band leader. Did I miss anything?
No, I'm a recovering drummer, but yes.
A recovering drummer. You go to Triple D?
I haven't had a drum set in 20 years or maybe more, but I occasionally sit down. We were doing some BPM tracks the other day, and the drums were set up and we're recording. So I went out and played on a song just to see how it felt. But it's always nice to just sort of pick up the sticks and throw down. But I think being a drummer has a huge effect on my production style and also my guitar, style of playing. It's sort of rhythmic oriented. It's not about a lot of notes and this and that, but it's where the note happens is very important to me. And each note needs to have some sort of importance. And so a million notes doesn't make sense for me. But so I think drumming, though, a lot of producers I find are ex-drummers or drummers still.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that because, Miles Davis once said a long time ago that, the note is not what's important. It's the timing of the note, the length of the note, the duration, the color and tone.
And the rest.
The
rest between the notes.
Yeah, it tells you very little when it's on the sheet.
Yeah.
So that's what makes artists.
That's what makes the notes sing. The notes has to sing. It's not just a note. But my parents were both musicians, and my dad was a pretty serious, theorist, and he always said to me, the wrong note played at the right time is better than the right note played at the wrong time.
That's great.
Probably both suck, but anyway, something like that.
That's great. That's really, it's true. He's right.
He always used to tell me, talent skips a generation, and he was serious.
That's funny because I have 2 PhDs. My mother told my neighbor once that my son's educated beyond his intelligence.
Okay, that's sad.
So you got it from your dad. I got it from my mom. Anyway, I'm curious about something. When you go to compose, since you are a recovering drummer, as you put it, when you're composing, do you do it on a keyboard? How do you?
I don't play keyboards at all. I play guitar, and I'm probably strongest coming up with melodic ideas rather than chord changes and that sort of thing. So I usually write around a melodic structure that's in my mind, and either to a track that's already there or even to nothing. But it starts with the melody and the rhythm of the melody and just how that feels. And that's I come up with the tempo and the sort of vibe of how I want that cadence to be. And then I come up with chords around it, or somebody else comes up with chords around it. But so yeah, there's different ways of doing it. But yeah, keep just guitar and sometimes just in my head. And I'll use my memo on my phone and I'll just sing a melody or a stop or this or that.
Mm-hmm. So you don't do it the same way every time, obviously.
No, not at all. There's this, it happens so differently on so many, sometimes I have like about 10 guys that send me tracks on a regular basis, just the music, no melody. And I'll listen to it. And some of them I'm like, as soon as I hear it, I got the melody. I'll pick up my guitar and just stream of consciousness, and it just kind of pours out. Other times I'll listen to it like 10 times and I'll be like, I just don't hear anything, you know. And then I'll get out with the guitar and start messing around and start to, okay, I can see where this is going, but it doesn't speak to me in the same fashion. And but it's interesting that usually it happens really fast for me, or it doesn't happen at all.
So do you make time to compose, or is it just willy-nilly when it hits you?
Well, it's really, I don't set aside time, but like almost every morning I have a cup of coffee and sit down and start playing the guitar, and I'm either writing to a track or trying to play to a track. So yeah, I do a lot of writing like that, but sometimes, I play golf a lot, and believe it or not, when I'm playing golf, I have a lot of musical ideas, and just, nature affects you a certain way. You hear something in your head and it's like, okay. And so it happens all different kinds of ways. I used to ride a motorcycle, and I realized with my helmet on, you can sort of hear yourself breathe.
Yeah, yeah.
You're also in survival mode because you don't want to die. So your brain kind of frees up. And I realized, golf is the same thing, because when you're in that moment of hitting the golf ball, you really have to free your mind because you can't be thinking about anything. So lots of thoughts come into your mind when you're doing that, when you free it up like that. It's not being barraged.
Yeah, but golf is a lot safer than trying to compose on a motorcycle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious about something else about you, Paul. So, as I've read through your bios and all the accolades on the web about your wonderful guitar playing and your composing, you began your solo career kind of late. You're age 48, when most people are in mid-career, you're starting your solo career. Why did it take you so long to get to a solo career?
Well, I really hadn't had an intention of being a guitar solo career kind of thing. And, when I was a drummer, I was always in bands because, drums is not really a great solo instrument. But I was writing songs and playing guitar and writing songs for the band. But and then, like you said in your introduction, I got married. My brother-in-law was head engineer at Warner Brothers, Lee Hirschberg, and who's still around. He's 92 years old, I think, now. But anyway, he started me in the studio, and that sort of like changed my whole, from going from being a sort of average drummer into engineering and producing in the studio. And when I first started, I was working 100-hour weeks. I mean, I couldn't wait to get back to the studio. It was just amazing. And like you said, we were working on Van Halen and Christopher Cross and Ry Cooder and James Taylor and Sinatra, and it's just on and on and on every day. Wow. And I remember that one of the first long bookings I had was in the daytime, from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We were doing Van Halen's Diver Down album at Amigo. And then from 6 to midnight, we were doing Michael McDonald's first solo album.
Oh, wow. I love Michael McDonald.
So at night, we had Steve Gadd on drums, Steve Lukather on guitar, Chuck Rainey on bass, Polino DaCosta, and, and then in the afternoon, we had Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen, who are also amazing musicians on a whole different level. And so like day and night, I just was like, went on for like 3 months.
Wow.
That was a typical, I was an assistant engineer at the time, but learning from the best, and it was, I got to witness so many great albums being recorded, and it was a really wonderful way to learn how to produce and arrange and engineer and master and, all of it.
That's great. We have a fan saying hello to you. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Christy.
And let's see. Excellent, perfect show. She's really enjoying your conversation.
Cool.
Yeah, one fan tuned in already. We haven't even played your music yet.
Right.
So, so when you finally got to start your solo career, how the timing of it, what was it that said, this is right now?
I was writing a song on the guitar, and I wrote this song. Which is 24/7. And, it was the first time, I was just writing. I wasn't writing it for myself. just writing it for Kirk Whalum or Boney or whatever, because who I was working with at that time. And I played it back and I was like, wow, that sounds like a finished product. And I really hadn't had that experience with me playing the guitar. So I said, well, wow, this really is cool. So I played it for some people and they're like, hey man, do some more. So that was my first record up front. And it was just sort of came out of nowhere, really. And then going out to support it. So from being a drummer behind the cymbals and behind, and then to behind the board in the studio, I really wasn't out front as a front man. Now, as a guitarist, solo artist, I'm a front man. And so that was a pretty big transition. And it's not as easy as it seems. And I'm still trying to get better at it, but it's an ongoing thing, evolution.
Yeah, that's why I was so curious, because given your background, to suddenly be a front man, that must have been challenging and somewhat scary at the same time.
It's fun, I think, playing live, you can practice all you want in your room, but until you get out and play live, you really don't get exceptional on your instrument, I don't think. And it's a whole other experience, and that's that survival mode again. You're playing, and you got to play, and you can't just not. So it's freeing in a lot of ways, and it's cool to get. I love playing with the cats. From being a drummer and whatever, always playing with people, and playing live with musicians is just so much fun. And of course, you get the reaction from the audience, which is great. You feed off of that and get to meet people that love your music, which is also amazing.
Yeah, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but given your background in production, and watching so many of these legends perform at Warner's, and then moving out to the front as you did as a front man, were you comfortable in front of the audience from day one?
No, not really. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. And I worked on it, and I practiced, and it's different playing guitar standing up, because you usually practice sitting down. In front of the audience, you're doing your thing, and I used to have to look down at my hands quite a bit until a few people said, it really looks like you're looking down at the guitar all the time. You should look at the audience, and little things like that. You're like, oh yeah, you're right. So you start thinking about it, and I've had other people give me good advice for how to do things live, and I guess I'm fairly natural. My parents, like I said, were both entertainers, and sort of in the blood, I guess.
That's great. People thought for years Roy Orbison was blind, but he wore those sunglasses because he hated performing in front of an audience. He was scared.
Maybe I should try that.
He wore dark sunglasses. Everybody approached it differently. So let's talk a little bit about your collaborations. You have such a long history of collaborations, and you've worked with some of the top people in the industry. You work with saxophonists with Sexy Thang featuring Darren Ron, One Way Back. Back's deeper musical core is a series of dynamic collaborations with other artists like Chris Stranding and Peter White and Mark Antoine and Chuck Loeb. Tell us a little bit, listeners, about do you have a natural affinity for collaboration? How do you choose which artists you want to work with for any given project?
Well, I think it wasn't as thought about like that. It was kind of like I was doing my first record, and at the time I was working. I did Boney's first 9 records, for Warner Brothers, and during that time, also worked with Peter White. I did 6 or 7 records. And with Rick Braun and Kirk, all these guys. So that when it came time for my album, I said, hey, Boney, can you please play on a couple songs? He goes, of course. So he came and played, and Peter came and played, and Mark Antoine played. So it was a sort of a natural thing. It wasn't like, I didn't really want to have a collaboration. But later, I actually did a real collaboration with Mark Antoine in this Foreign Exchange album, where it was a record of just he and I duetting. And then I did one with Larry Carlton too, which was really amazing, and gone out and played gigs with Larry. And so that was really inspiring. And those are the real 2 records I did that I consider collaborations. So all the other ones they're just guesting, people have guest artists on their records.
Yeah, again, Yeah, I'm just curious, how do you choose from all the people you know and met, how do you choose which ones you want on any given project? I mean,
It's not that difficult. I mean,
it isn't?
there's a song that I'm like, well, sax would be great on this, and I love Boney, so why wouldn't I have Boney? And this one would be nice to have some guitar, and But I mean, it's the people that I have access to. It's not like I'm going like I'm going to call Miles Davis to play on my record or something. But the only actually, I all the records that I've produced, I've done a lot of collaborations on as well. I've only had one person ever say no, that I won't do it, and that was guy from Weather Report, Austrian guy. Drawing a blank on his name at the moment. You know what I'm talking about, the keyboard player for Weather Report.
I know who you're talking about. I'm drawing the same blank, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Joe Zalma. Joe Zalma.
Yeah.
I called him up to play on a Sam Rainey record, the saxophone player. And he said, man, I really don't play on anything unless I produce it. So I said, okay, well, take a listen, see if, he was the one guy who wouldn't. I got Freddie Hubbard that came down and played on something. Luther Vandross, Al Jarreau, Bobby Caldwell. They've all guessed on my stuff,
Yeah, I mean, you've had amazing people on all of your projects. And look, I know you know them, but I was from all the range of people I was just kind of curious.
Part of it's just you ask people, and whoever says yes. But I mean, I've been lucky. I had the advantage of producing, for Al Jarreau and for Luther, and I mean, these people are like, I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy helping them, so I think they felt like, why not?
That's great. You have another fan, Joe, saying beautiful show, and now and here's somebody else who's a fellow musician. Do you know Ellis White, guitarist?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Ellis says good evening.
Nice.
And nice to see you on the show. So you have a number of people tuning in already and are interested in your projects and your music.
Cool.
Let's talk about your collaboration with BPM. It's another amazing Paul Brown transition. How did you form BPM? I mean, you mentioned before, at the airport you talked, with I forgot which one. I think it was Bromberger. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I wanted to do like a foreplay thing, and it didn't seem like they were going to invite me to play with foreplay. So I said, I'm going to start my own foreplay. So, because I always admired, Bob James is one of my favorites. And of course, but they had Lee Ritenour, and they had Larry, and they had Chuck Loeb, and Harvey Mason's also one of my all-time hero favorite drummers, and Nathan East is amazing. And just seeing what they did, because at the time that they came out, I had a production deal with Warner Brother Records. After I went through like 10 years of being an assistant engineering, then I actually got offered, when I started producing Boney, I got offered an exclusive production deal with Warner Brothers. So I literally went up the ladder from when I started. I was an assistant driver setup guy, and then an assistant engineer, then an engineer producer. And then they sold the studio, and some other people bought the studio. And then I got hired by Warner Brothers as a executive producer. So that was a pretty amazing situation. And so that, I forget why I said that, but
we're talking about how you formed BPM.
Oh yeah, well, no, because foreplay at the time, I was able to sign people to the label. And Bob James was still an executive, and he's the guy who really signed Boney to Warner Brothers, and because they really weren't that into smooth jazz at the time. They had Pat Metheny and David Sanborn and Joe Sample, but not anything like smooth. So Bob James was like loving it, and so Bob signed it. But I've always loved Bob, and I produced 2 records for Bob, and then we signed Norman Brown and Kirk Whalum and Rick Braun, and on and on and on. But Foreplay decided that they were going to do that collaboration of Foreplay when they first came out. I was like, well, that's interesting. and the four like the best guys on each instrument, you know, and then with the writing capability and production capability of Bob James, which is, you know, one of the best all time. So I always, you know, wanted to be in a band like that, maybe because I grew up in bands. So that was sort of the genesis of why I wanted to do BPM. And so when I heard Brian, he is an exceptional musician like Nathan East or Bob. I mean, he's in that, you know, rarefied air, you know. And I mean, I don't consider myself at that stage on a guitar. Production, yes, but not on the guitar. And actually working with Brian has really elevated my guitar playing a lot. So that was one of the other reasons I wanted to do collaborations, like playing with Larry Carlton and going out and getting on stage with Larry Carlton. You better kick ass, you know, and you know, do the best you can. And it really, really elevated my guitar playing as well. And same thing with Mark Antoine. Mark Antoine, virtuoso. So those are the reasons, you know, partly why I like to challenge myself on that level. And like my first record, when I came out with Up Front, it was really more about the production, and the guitar playing was sort of secondary. But then as I got better and better and better, like now it's maybe 50-50, and now I can play the guitar after 13 solo CDs, you know?
I think your guitar playing is off the chain. I think it's fabulous. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit. You know, you mentioned smooth jazz and Boney and, you know, and Bob James. Smooth jazz is an omnibus term. It's crossover to soul, funk, R&B, rock, blues. But to me, it's still jazz without an edge. That's the way it's always struck me. And you put the edge back in smooth jazz. That's why I think what you're doing is not just evolutionary, it's revolutionary. And you kept your trademark deep funk and cool urban vibe, and you brought it to smooth jazz. And you can tap deeper, and you have a lifelong love of blues. I know that from reading so much about you. And that includes, you know, you had foundational sense, passion, you know, for people like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, Little Feat, and B.B. King, and they're all R&B crossovers to jazz and rock.
That's true.
You know, so your bluesy, funky style is what so attracts me to your music within that omnibus smooth jazz concept, the smooth jazz genre. Yours is decidedly different, you know, and that's why, you know, I think BPM is exemplary of this kind of funky, bluesy, breath of fresh air, you know, within smooth jazz. So I want to play Seriously. I love that song, and that's going to be forthcoming, correct? Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
That is, that's the name of the CD, and it's, you know, one of the more upbeat songs on the record. We wanted to do, you know, it is smooth jazz, but we also, there's a lot of depth to it. And like you said, there's funk, there's blues, there's all of that stuff. And Brian being so jazz oriented and me sort of being more blues oriented, the two is a very nice combination. Michael can play bebop or he can play smooth jazz. He's very versatile. And so, but the songs sort of lend themselves more to the funk, smooth vibe, you know.
Yeah, does Michael do pop also?
No, not really. He played with Al Jarreau for a long time.
Yeah, that's why I thought he might do pop too. But
no.
Why don't you tell us about the song Seriously a little bit? What's behind that?
Well, that one actually Brian pretty much wrote by himself. I mean, I kind of wrote 8 songs and Brian wrote 2, and Seriously is one of them. And we weren't thinking we were going to have a lot of horns on this project aside from Michael, but Brian really had the idea of doing this like horn oriented song. And I right up to the mixing, I was like, well, let me do a mix without the horns, you know, but he really loved the horns. And I've kind of grown used to them now, but it's just it sounds more like a Brian Bromberg song than it does a BPM song. Once you hear the whole album of BPM, you'll see that it has a very unique sound. But this song, Seriously, sounds more like one of our albums than BPM. But I love it. I think it's great. And we're probably going to be playing it, next week at the Laguna Arts Festival. This song, so it's a good one.
Terrific. Well, let's hear now, Seriously, by BPM and Paul Brown.
Here's one thing that the smooth jazz doesn't do that Brian does. This song, so it goes in a normal sort of fashion of, verse B, chorus, verse B, chorus. But then there's a 32 bar guitar solo, which I never do 32 bars with it. But not only that, after that, there's a 32 bar sax solo. Then there's a 32 bar bass solo. So naming a smooth jazz song that does that.
Well, you're making my point that what you're doing in smooth jazz is revolutionary, and people love it because it puts an edge back into smooth jazz that wasn't there. So let's hear it right now. It's a wonderful track from BPM, Seriously. That's fabulous, Paul. Yeah, and your guitar playing is so funky. Yeah, I love it.
Thanks.
I love it. You got another comment from Kenny Rodman. You're a bad man, Paul. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your. I'm just want to kind of fill out your background prior to going solo. You were born in Los Angeles. You're raised with a guitar with a strong R&B driven sound, and it's really urban jazz to me more than it is, again, smooth jazz. And you've been doing this since the 1990s. And you mentioned before you produced saxophonist Boney James, and you worked with Bob James. So from doing all of this, and you work with such influential artists. You mentioned Carlton, Euge Groove, and Rick Braun, and Kirk Whalum, and Jeff Golub, and Al Jarreau, and Jesse Jam, and on and on. So how did all of this, listening to these great artists and you working in production, how did this help you formulate what kind of a solo artist you want to be? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I think they all had an influence on me. I mean, the funny thing is, I was working with Luther Vandross, right? I worked with Luther for 15 years and basically recording his vocals. And anytime he was going to sing, he wanted me there. And so I would go do the Oprah show, or I'd go here or there, but mostly in recording studio, and learned a lot about how to do vocals and background vocals and how to arrange for background vocals, how to do ad libs. And then, what I was mixing Bobby Caldwell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And who I love as well. And his manager at the time, this was in '89, he asked me, would I go on the road with him in Japan and record live and do the house sound? So I wasn't thinking about being a guitarist or anything. So I said, yeah, well, okay, I'll do that. So the first day of rehearsal, I meet Jim Oppenheim, Boney James. And so he, once we're on the tour, where he knew I worked with Luther, he loved my work with Luther. And he asked me a couple of weeks into the tour, man, I really want you to produce an album for me. And I really hadn't done any jazz. I was doing R&B music, and I worked with this group Shy, and that's the kind of stuff I was doing, R&B music. So I said, well, I thought about it for a while, and we were hanging out, and I said, hey, if you change your name from Jim Oppenheim, we didn't have Boney at the moment, but we were thinking about names, and we do a Luther Vandross record with saxophone, I'm in, I'll do it. So that's exactly what we did. We did a Luther. It was very urban at the time. This was 1990. It was Spyro Gyra, Kenny G, David Sanborn, Grover, but really there was no urban music. So when we put out Trust, the first album, it sounded like a Luther record. We even did, Creepin' and some other songs Luther style, and had the big 808 drums and the big fat, kicks, and it was sounding like an urban record. And at first the radio was like, well, no, can you take that out? And I was like, no. I didn't really know that much about smooth jazz radio. I just knew that I thought this was cool. And they put it out, and his record just was selling like, at the time, to give you an idea, a Rick Braun or something like that was maybe selling 20,000 records total, right? When that was a lot, that was good. And but Boney came out, he was selling 20,000 a week.
Yeah.
It went gold like so fast, and people were like, "What is this?" And who is this kid? And Bob James called me and said, "Who?" And David Sanborn called me. He said, "Man, what's up with this kid Boney?" I said, "Well, he's got a thing. What do you need?" David Sanborn. He goes, "Yeah, he does have a thing, doesn't he?" And he's. And people always say, "Well, why does he play like that? Or why does Kirk Whalum play like that? Why does Rick Braun play like that? Can't they play straight ahead jazz?" I said, this is the music they love. Okay. He's not saying, I want to do this because I want to get on radio. That didn't even exist. He just played it because that's the kind of music he loves. And same thing with Kirk Whalum. And listen to Bob James. He has so much restraint. I mean, he can do anything. He could be, you know, Stravinsky, or he could do, you know, Oscar Peterson, but he chooses that tasty, amazing thing that we all love. And it's the same thing with Boney. All these cats, they have so much ability way beyond what you hear on smooth jazz radio. But I mean, I think that that's great. They got gas in the tank. You know, at any point they can take it out if they want to. But I mean, it's just not their thing. Where someone like me, I can't play jazz. I don't even consider myself a jazz guitar player. I do what I do, and you know, people like it. But it's funny because I was having a birthday party at my house 20 years ago, and my dad, you know, was there, and I had Boney and Kirk Whalum and Peter White and Euge Groove. We're all sitting around and talking about how the guys were all saying how they hated the word smooth, and it was it wasn't cool and blah blah blah. And my dad said, "Hold it, fellas. What you guys do is not jazz, but by and large, it is smooth." So I'm like, "Thanks, Dad." So you know, he kind of nailed it.
Yeah, that's great. You know, because you know, have you ever done any work with Pieces of a Dream?
No.
Yeah, I'm just curious because you know they're very funky.
Most of the stuff I do is West Coast too. You know, there's a lot of that. I mean, I have worked with. I mean, you know, Jeff Golub was in New York, or so was Chuck Loeb. But you know, I haven't really done stuff with people in Detroit and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, you know, I want to play another one of your BPM songs, but I want to ask you a question before we play it. You've done all these collaborations, you've met all these fabulous artists and worked with them. If you could collaborate with any musician, any artist from any century, from anywhere in the world, who would you love to collaborate with?
You know, I would. I love Luther. You know, and his voice just absolutely pours out of the speakers. So soulful, so amazing. And I never really got a chance to play guitar with him. You know, we worked in the studio countless times, but I think that would be really special. I've been so lucky, man, to work. I mean, you know, Tommy LaPuma, one of my heroes, flies me to New York, you know, and says, "Hey, I want you to start working for GRP." This is when I had my deal with Warner Brothers. He was trying to pull me away from Warner Brothers. He said, "Hey, I want you to work with, you know, I want you to come over here to GRP, and I want you to do this and do that. And my first artist I want you to work with is George Benson." I'm like, "So you're going to lunch right now?" So I went over to New Jersey and met George in New Jersey. We sat down, had lunch, and he nodded off for a while. And I woke him up and said, "George," he goes, "Oh man, let's go back to the house." He gives me the keys to his Bentley. You know, so I got a chance to work with George and Al Jarreau. These guys are my favorite artists. Jeffrey Osborne, Patty Austin. You know, it's great. I worked with Quincy. I mean, it's nutty. And so, you know, you have to learn from all these people. I mean, you cannot not. You can be in the studio with Luther Vandross and not learn anything. Come on.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Well, you know, I want to play Black Pearls.
Well, I got a story about that one.
Yeah. So, well, good. I was just going to ask you.
One of the things that people are always surprised by is I'm a deadhead, and Jerry Garcia is probably one of my favorite guitar players.
Oh.
So, you know, and I always say, when people say, "Well, who are your influences?" and I say Jerry Garcia, Wes Montgomery, and they say, "Well, how can you put those two in one sentence?" I said, "Well, I tell you, that's what I listen to." I mean, really, before I got into jazz, I only listened to like Eric Clapton, Jerry Garcia. Those are the people that I listened to, you know. And anyway, I did love Weather Report in those early, you know, to me, that was the predecessor to smooth jazz. I mean, they were really out there sometimes, but some of their compositions were amazing smooth jazz, I think. So anyway, I wanted to do a song on BPM, and I wanted it to be a cross between Weather Report and the Grateful Dead. So this song, you know, the keyboard player, ex-keyboard player for Spyro Gyra, Tom Schulman, he had this track, and he sent it to me. He's living in Spain now. Anyway, he sent me this track, and there were elements about it that I thought were amazing. But he had all this weird grooving on it, and the layout of it was like very strange. So I said, send me all that information, okay, on files, and let me mess around with it. So I took it, and he played some amazing keyboards on this thing. And I took it and I put it into a shape that I thought would be really cool with no groove at all. It was just a shaker. And then I put my part on and I sent it to Brian. And I said, I want you to play here. I want you to play fretless bass, all of Jaco Pastorius. And I sent it to Michael. I wanted him to play, and he actually came to my house. Soprano sax, weather report. And then we decided we put the drums and the bass on after that. But anyway, you'll see when you listen to it, see if you don't hear Grateful Dead and Weather Report on this.
I'm definitely going to listen to that now. I never thought about
smooth jam band.
Well, I'll be trucking when I'm listening to it.
Exactly.
Okay, this is Black Pearls again.
That's what I wanted to call the band at first, Black Pearl. I thought it was a killer name, but the record company was like, no, you got to have your names somehow.
How did you come up with Black Pearls? I was going to ask you that question.
Believe it or not, AI. I asked AI. I have a band with 3 guys. Give me some names for a jazz band with 3 guys, and they gave me like 300 names, and that was one of them. I said, Black Pearl, that's so cool. And I know it's a sailing ship by the pirate. It was the fastest ship that couldn't be caught and all that. So there's another part of Black Pearl I didn't even know about until recently. But I just thought it was a cool name, and the look, the visual of Black Pearls fits this song too.
Wonderful. Okay. I'm glad I asked you that because I was really curious about it. So here's Black Pearls, BPM, okay, and Paul Brown.
Cool.
Oh man, I love that. And I know what you're saying when you say that you hear Jerry Garcia and you kind of hear Grateful Dead in there. But this is interesting. Claudine Jorgensen, who's listening in, she said she hears shades of war.
I wonder
when
which
she listens
song
to
she's
Black
hearing. I don't know.
What?
What song of war? I don't get that one.
Yeah, I think she's probably talking about just the beat or the tempo. That's what I imagine. You know, but she said she listened to it over 100 times.
Not that familiar with wars like repertoire. I only know a couple songs, but she said she's listened to it over 100 times. How's that possible? It's not released yet.
She must have picked it up somewhere. Somebody must have pirated it.
I don't think so. Not yet.
Really?
Maybe she's talking about a different song.
Maybe that might be it. Maybe she's got it
Black
confused.
Pearls. Mine's just Black Pearl.
Maybe she's referring to a different song.
That would make sense. It doesn't sound like war. I don't hear the war thing. Whoa.
In that case, let me take that comment off.
Maybe ask her. Can you ask her a question? Which is she talking about that song we just listened to?
No, I can't. I can't because she's not. Yeah, I can't. I can't go back to her.
All right.
But maybe she's listening in and she'll come back and comment.
Yeah.
You know, look, we're starting to run out of time, and I want to play more of your music.
Okay.
So, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about your blue period, your Picasso period, when you're doing blues in 2016 and 2018. But I'll have to have you come back on at some point to really talk about that more deeply. But I do want to talk about, I do want you to just give some background on Secret Sauce and let the audience know something about that song.
Well, it's funny because the song 24/7, which was my first single, and the song I played you earlier, was basically the first song that made me want to be a solo artist, was written by the same guy who wrote the music to Secret Sauce, the guy Jeff Crothers, who I collaborated with a lot on early Boney stuff. And I haven't really done a lot with him lately, although I did a couple songs with Norman Brown with him and others, but we haven't done that much lately. But he did write the music to that song, and it does have the other song that we did together was called The Funky Joint, which is also real similar to this with the horns and the really hardcore R&B beat to it, you know.
Well, you know, some of the music we've been playing tonight, I just really love, and I can't wait till some of it's released. You know, I'm sure people on my station are going to be calling in and wanting to know where they can get it, which I'm going to have you talk about before we go off the air today. So let's play. I'm going to play Secret Sauce now from Paul Brown. Love it, Paul. It's such a great track.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed listening to your music all night. You know, we're running out of time, and I want to talk to you about so many more things, but I think I'd want to play one more of your songs, the last song, because it really is about your music as much as it is about you. I want to play East Side Party. You want to tell people a few things about East Side Party, and then we'll play it for everybody.
Yeah, well, it was one of the more commercial songs on the BPM record, and we have a couple different versions of it. One that goes on and on with solos and stuff like that. But generally, it's a super radio track and just funky, you know, soulful, melodic song, a memorable hook. I hope
It is memorable. You know, and all of your music have such, you know, great. The timing in so many of these songs is so impeccable. You know, I love listening to your tracks. It's just great. So let's play East Side Party for everybody, and then we can kind of wrap up. Well, that's just outstanding. Was Marion Meadows on Promised Land?
Say it again.
Was Marion Meadows on your working with you on Promised Land?
Yes, he played on one song. Yes, and I did some. I did fewer songs for his last record. I just finished a new one for his new record as well. Just one song.
Yeah, okay, but he didn't appear on East Side Party. That wasn't him playing, right?
On that song, no.
No, I didn't think so.
That's Michael Paolo on sax, and he also played the flute part.
Okay, that's such a great track. I really enjoyed this so much. I just wish there was more time for us to talk about some of the other aspects, of your career. And I'd love to have you come back at some point and spend some more time with us. Why don't you tell all the people listening in? By the way, there's 171,000 people listening in today and watching. So you have a nice audience tonight. Nice. One of my highest audiences I've ever had on the show. So thank you. Wow. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how they can find your music, where they can buy it, and how they can get in contact with you? Well,
the music is available on all the platforms. All my records are on labels. I haven't done an independent on my own label. I haven't done that yet. So my first two are on GRP, and my second two are on Concord. And then I had one on Shawnee, and then I did 5 records for Woodward. And now I'm back on Shawnee, and this will be my third, because Larry Carlton duet record was also on Shawnee. My third Shawnee release and my 13th CD. And so you can get that. The BPM is also going to be on Shawnee, and wherever you get your music from, you can find it. And so yeah, and then we have a website. It's called bpmband.net. So you can see where our concerts are and what's happening.
And how do they find your website?
My website is super easy, paulbrownjazz.com. Even though my dad says I'm not a jazzer, it's paulbrownjazz.com.
You don't want to be what you are.
Right. It's okay.
Well, it's been just a real pleasure. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to appear on the Power Hour tonight.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. You take care of yourself. Well, everybody, that was Paul Brown, and you heard some just fabulous music from Paul. And we hope to have him back on in the near future. Our next artist coming up is Erin Stevenson, so be sure to tune in again, another edition of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. And well, have a great week. Take care.
I'm Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour.
My name is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.